You know, usually when we talk about history, or I don't know, even if we're trying to figure out some complex medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of like absolute clinical precision.
Right, you want the exact fact.
Exactly. Think about it like modern engineering. You fall, you break your arm, the x ray comes back showing that jagged, glowing white line on the black film, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is. That's the fracture.
Yeah, it's visible, it's categorized, it's very neat. Cause and effect.
Right. But what happens when you step out of the modern clinic and into the world of ancient history?
It gets messy.
Very messy, specifically into the realm of spiritual lineage and the kind of profound, world-altering anticipation we're exploring today. Suddenly, that standard, neat little X-ray machine of historical analysis is completely shattered.
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't apply at all.
We are looking at a landscape that is just deeply layered, stretching across multiple centuries, continents, and empires. We are looking at a man whose arrival was documented in royal decrees centuries before his own grandfather was even born.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. It's a narrative that challenges our entire concept of coincidence. And before we pull back the curtain on exactly how this massive historical stage was set, I want to ask that if you find yourself as fascinated by these hidden layers of history as we are, please make sure to subscribe, like, and follow the show right now so you never miss out on these deep dives.
It really is incredibly compelling to examine history through this lens. I mean, we are moving totally away from the idea of random events and looking at a meticulously curated timeline.
So let's establish our mission for today's deep dive. We are taking a highly detailed, very granular look into Chapter 2 from Malanamaki's Sirat un-Nabi Urdu.
Excellent source material for this.
Yeah, and our focus is this extraordinary window of time, the period just before and immediately surrounding the birth of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, to truly set the stage based on the source text, we have to comprehend the massive scale being presented to you here.
Right. The numbers are huge.
The text mentions a theological tradition stating that throughout human history, there were 124,000 prophets.
And 313 messengers.
Exactly. That is an enormous procession of figures guiding humanity. Yet, out of all of those, the text argues that the arrival of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was preceded by a level of cosmic, geographical, and historical anticipation that is entirely unmatched.
Yeah, and that is the crucial baseline for everything we're going to discuss today. The narrative through line we are tracking isn't just, a sequence of interesting historical anecdotes.
It's much bigger than that.
Way bigger. We are going to examine how the global geopolitical stage, the hyper-specific ancestral lineage, and even the literal physical environment of the desert were all painstakingly aligned for this one specific arrival.
So we're really extracting the why and the how behind these accounts.
Precisely. The source material does not treat a single one of these elements as a mere coincidence or a quirk of fate.
No accidents here.
None. Every shifting empire, every preserved bloodline, every relocated well of water, it's all presented as a crucial gear in a massive, deliberate, divine design.
And that brings us to the first major claim from the text, which honestly completely reframes how we think about historical foresight. The text asserts that unlike other prophets who, arrived and then established their prophethood.
Like they show up and then do the work.
Right. But the arrival of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was anticipated, recognized, and formally prepared for long before his actual birth.
Long before.
And we are not just talking about vague, mystical prophecies shouted in a town square by some random person.
Right, not folklore.
We are talking about formal, institutional declarations. The source provides this amazing example of the king of Yemen.
Yes, the Tuba monarch.
Tuba monarch. According to the text, this powerful king studied ancient scriptures, realized the final prophet would emerge in the Valley of Makkah, and he didn't just, write a journal entry about it.
He drafted a formal royal decree.
Which is huge.
It is, because a royal decree in the ancient world carried the absolute weight of law and statecraft. It wasn't a personal reflection. It was a binding document of the state.
He wrote this letter explicitly pledging his allegiance, legally declaring himself a minister and a soldier to the prophet, and then he left it as a royal trust.
To be passed down.
Yeah, he commanded that this document be passed down through generations until it could be physically delivered to a person who did not yet exist.
Which is just a stunning level of conviction.
I kept thinking of this as the ultimate historical time capsule. or like a post-dated check spanning centuries. But the logistics of that are staggering. How
Hmm.
does the source frame this level of hyper-specific foreknowledge? I mean, think about the psychology of an entire royal court or generations of custodians whose sworn duty is to guard a post-dated pledge of allegiance to a man centuries away from being born.
So the source uses this Tuba monarch's letter to illustrate a profound point about the absolute certainty derived from these ancient texts. If you look at the psychology of a monarch, they are generally obsessed with their own immediate legacy, right? Their own borders, their wealth.
They're very ego-driven.
Exactly. So for a king to possess such unwavering conviction that he formally subjugates his own geopolitical power,
Calling himself a mere soldier.
right, calling himself a soldier and minister to a future figure, it speaks to the undeniable clarity of the signs he was studying. The anticipation here wasn't just a quiet spiritual hope.
It was institutionalized.
Yes. By making it a royal trust, the king forced entire generations of custodians to actively participate in this waiting. It created an ongoing, centuries-long atmosphere of expectation.
Wow.
You have to imagine the cultural weight of passing down a sealed royal document, telling your children, guard this with your life for a king who is yet to come.
It transforms the very fabric of their society into a massive waiting room.
That is a phenomenal way to put it. A society as a waiting room.
And the source doesn't just rely on ancient royal letters. It gives us tangible, almost visual evidence of this anticipation. Like the fascinating account of the companion Zubair bin Mutim, may Allah be pleased with him.
Oh, the incident in Sham.
Yes. The text details that before he embraced Islam, he was traveling for trade in the Levant, the region historically referred to as Sham. And while there, he encounters a Christian monk.
Right.
And this monk doesn't just talk to him, he shows him a physical archive. Imagine being Zubair bin Mutim, may Allah be pleased with him, walking into this quiet, ancient space, and the monk starts unlocking compartments,
Pulling out portraits.
pulling out portraits of prophets.
And we really have to remember the context of archiving in that era. These weren't mass-produced images or posters.
Not at all.
These were carefully guarded, sacred relics kept in specialized boxes, treated with the utmost reverence.
So Zubair bin Mutim, may Allah be pleased with him, is looking through these, and he is completely stunned to find a highly accurate, recognizable portrait of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Because he knows him.
He knows this man back in Makkah, but the monk clarifies that this portrait wasn't drawn from life by someone who had, traveled to Makkah and seen him. It was drawn purely based on the physical and behavioral blueprints found in ancient scriptures, like the original Torah and the Gospel.
This is where we have to examine the granularity of the information available to these ancient scholars.
What do you mean by granularity?
Well, the source points out that the prior scriptures didn't just offer a generalized symbolic prophecy like, a beacon of light will emerge from the desert.
Right, something vague.
No, they provided a shockingly detailed empirical profile. They prophesied the specific migration to a city described as Taiba, which translates to the pure city.
Which is widely understood to be Medina.
Exactly. They described a very specific physical anomaly, too. A mark between the shoulders, which became known as the seal of prophethood.
But the physical description is only half of it. What strikes me is the behavioral profiling in the text. It feels almost like an ancient psychological workup.
Precisely. The text explicitly notes that these ancient documents outlined his exact temperament. They specified that he wouldn't be harsh or coarse in his daily interactions.
Okay.
They highlighted that he wouldn't be someone who shouts or raises his voice in the busy, chaotic markets.
Let's pause on that for a second, because understanding the ancient Arab market completely recontextualizes that detail.
Oh, totally.
Markets back then weren't just, grocery stores where you quietly buy your apple.
Right, they were loud.
They were the center of civic life. Places of intense bartering, poetry battles, boasting, aggressive trading. A quiet, composed demeanor in that specific environment was a massive, noticeable contrast to the cultural norm.
Exactly. Is a distinguishing behavioral marker.
Yeah.
And the scriptures even detailed a highly specific legal and financial trait,
Which was?
that he would accept gifts, but he would absolutely never consume or accept charity, known as sadaqah.
Wait, really? Never accept charity.
Never. In Islamic theology, accepting charity implies a state of need or reliance on others that is incompatible with the elevated spiritual independence required of this specific prophetic station.
Oh, that makes sense.
So, when the monk in Sham is painting that portrait, or when the Tuba king in Yemen is writing his decree, they aren't guessing.
They have a checklist.
They are working off a meticulously detailed blueprint. The source argues that this level of pre-arrival documentation, encompassing geography, physical traits, psychology, and financial laws, is completely unmatched in the history of the 124,000 prophets.
Man. So we have this intense, localized anticipation among scholars and kings who have read the texts. But what does this mean for the macro level?
The global stage.
Right. The source shifts from the ink of ancient scriptures directly to the physical map of the world. It paints this really vivid picture of the geopolitical canvas right before the birth of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
And it was a tense map.
Very tense. We are looking at a globe utterly dominated by two absolute crushing superpowers.
The Romans and the Persians.
Oh. Yes, the Roman Empire, symbolized by the title of Caesar, and the Persian Empire, symbolized by Khosrow.
To understand the weight of this, we really have to comprehend what superpower meant in late antiquity.
They weren't just big countries.
Not at all. They were sprawling, voracious machines of assimilation. They essentially cleaved the known world in half.
Like a giant pie.
Yeah. Whether you look to the west toward Rome and Byzantium, or to the east toward the Sassanid Persian Empire, their reach was inescapable.
They were everywhere.
They imposed heavy taxes, they maintained massive standing armies, and most importantly, they forced their cultural and religious frameworks onto their vassal states.
Right. The text mentions the Ghassanids served Rome, the Lakhmids served Persia. Everyone belonged to someone.
Everyone except for one place.
Except for this one specific barren region. This is where the source makes a massive point. Makkah and Medina remained completely defiantly independent of both of these colossal empires.
A total anomaly.
They were entirely outside the jurisdiction, the taxation, and the cultural control of Caesar and Khosrow. Now, I have to ask you about this because from a purely geographical standpoint, if Rome and Persia wanted to conquer Makkah, they surely had the military might to do it, right?
Oh, without question.
So why was it left alone? And how does the source interpret this?
Well, from a purely secular historical perspective, one might argue that Makkah was left alone because it was a harsh, unforgiving desert valley.
No oil, no gold.
Right? No significant agricultural value or major rivers to exploit. It simply wasn't worth the immense logistical cost of moving a Roman or Persian legion across hundreds of miles of deadly dunes.
But I'm guessing the source sees it differently.
Very differently. The source text interprets this geographical isolation as a deliberate, strategic, and theological shield.
A shield.
Yes, it unpacks the reasoning behind this absolute neutrality. If Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had been born within the borders of the Roman Empire or the Persian Empire, the divine message would inherently carry the cultural and political baggage of that empire.
Oh, I see. It would immediately be branded.
Exactly.
If he's born Roman, the Persians view the new religion as a Roman psychological operation or just a tool of Byzantine imperialism.
Precisely. It would be entirely localized by political borders. So by placing the arrival in this totally neutral center, a place devoid of any imperial influence, taxation, or military presence, the message could be broadcast equally in all directions without prejudice.
It makes me think of telecommunications.
How so?
Well, it's less about finding a nice valley and more about building a radio transmitter. You don't put a global broadcasting antenna down in a valley owned and regulated by a specific partisan corporation, right?
Right, they'd censor it.
You put it on the highest, most unobstructed, neutral mountain peak you can find so the signal can travel unimpeded.
That is a highly accurate analogy.
Mm.
And furthermore, the source notes that the Kaaba in Makkah was already the spiritual epicenter for the various Arab tribes.
Right. They were already going there for pilgrimage.
Exactly. So by initiating the final prophethood there, the message utilized a pre-existing, spiritually significant hub that was untethered to the superpowers.
So the political vacuum of Makkah wasn't a geographical accident?
Not according to the text. It was a perfectly engineered, neutral broadcasting center designed to allow the message to radiate outward to Europe, Africa, and Asia without any pre-existing borders stifling its momentum.
Okay, so the global map has been carefully sculpted to create this neutral zone.
Yes.
But the source then takes us on this dizzying zoom inward. We go from the macro politics of empires completely down to the microscopic level of biology and ancestry.
The bloodline.
The bloodline. The text makes a profound claim about the lineage of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It states that this lineage was kept entirely pure and was carefully, deliberately preserved all the way from Prophet Ismail down through the centuries to his father, Abdullah.
It's an unbroken chain.
The text explicitly traces the major nodes of this line. So it goes from Ismail down to Kina, then narrowing to the Quraysh tribe, further focusing on the clan of Banu Hashim.
And then,
then to his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, and finally to Abdullah.
what is essential to grasp here for you listening is how the source frames this genealogy. It goes to great lengths to emphasize that this was not merely a biological chain of survival.
What was it then?
It was a highly curated selection process driven by divine decree. At each generation, the text asserts that the best, most honorable, and most dignified branch of the family tree was chosen to carry the lineage forward.
Like a distillation process.
Exactly. It is a narrative of spiritual distillation.
And within that very specific chain of distillation, the text gives us this incredible, almost cinematic anecdote about the grandfather, Abdul Muttalib.
That's one of my favorite stories.
Because what a lot of people might not realize is that Abdul Muttalib was not the name he was given at birth.
No, his birth name was Sheba,
Shay.
which roughly translates to an old man or someone with white hair because he was reportedly born with a streak of white hair on his head.
Right. His name is Shaba. Now, the text explains the family dynamics. His father, Hashim, who was a massive figure in Makkah running the major trade routes, had passed away during a trading journey in Gaza.
A huge loss for the family.
A huge loss. And because of this, young Shaba was being raised by his mother in the city of Medina. His mother was from a very prominent, powerful family in Medina, and she raised him in comfort with a lot of love and care.
But he couldn't stay there.
No. As Shaba grew into a young boy, his paternal uncle back in Makkah, a man named Muttalib, realized there was a critical issue of legacy.
The Banu Hashim's honor was on the line.
Exactly. For the sake of their honor and to ensure the lineage remained centered in Makkah, the boy needed to be brought back to his ancestral home.
So Muttalib takes it upon himself to travel the harsh distance to Medina.
And it wasn't an easy trip.
Not at all. He essentially has a diplomatic negotiation with Shaba's mother. He argues that the boy cannot remain in Medina no matter how comfortable he is because his destiny and his rightful place of leadership are in Makkah.
That's a tough pitch to a mother.
It is. He warns that the Banu Hashim would face eternal cultural shame if the Arab tribes believed they were too weak or neglectful to raise their own brother's son.
Wow, the pressure.
Yeah. The mother is hesitant, but she ultimately gives Sheba the agency to choose, and the boy chooses to return with his uncle to fulfill his family duty.
And this journey back is where the famous historical misunderstanding occurs, forever altering his identity.
Such a fascinating moment.
Right. So Muttalib puts his incredibly handsome young nephew, Sheba, on the back of his camel, and they ride together into the valley of Makkah. Now, we have to look at the socioeconomic context of Makkah at this time.
It was a very wealthy city.
A wealthy mercantile city. The elite leaders of the Quraysh would frequently purchase young slaves from passing caravans, and having a well-dressed, handsome young servant was a visible status symbol. So when the local Makkans see Muttalib riding into town, covered in the dust of travel, with this beautiful, completely unfamiliar boy sitting humbly behind him on the camel, they immediately jump to the most logical conclusion based on their culture.
They assume he bought a slave.
Yes. They point at the boy and say, look, it's Abdul Muttalib, which literally translates to the slave of Muttalib.
You can just imagine Muttalib frantically trying to correct everyone.
No.
Yeah. No, this isn't a slave. This is my nephew, Sheba, the son of your late leader, Hashim.
But it was too late.
But way too late. In the oral, highly social culture of Makkah, once a catchy nickname took hold, it was impossible to erase.
It went viral, basically.
Exactly. The public perception solidified instantly. Sheba completely lost his original birth name in the eyes of the public and forever became known as Abdul Muttalib.
Let's dig into the why of this, because if we look at this through a purely secular, modern historical lens, this is just a funny historical quirk, right?
Just a misunderstanding.
Yeah, it's a case of mistaken identity that happened to stick, like a celebrity getting a weird tabloid nickname. But the text doesn't see it that way, does it?
Absolutely not.
How does the source reconcile a humiliating misunderstanding, being called a slave, with the idea of a divinely protected, highly dignified lineage?
Well, the source is adamant that within this specific narrative framework, there is absolutely no such thing as a random historical quirk.
Okay.
The text views every single detail as part of the orchestration. The underlying logic applied to this event is deeply symbolic.
Symbolic how?
By having the forefather of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, globally known by a name that literally means slave or servant, it strips away the arrogance often associated with tribal royalty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It permanently marks the lineage with the title of humility and servitude before the ultimate prophethood arrives.
That's incredibly poetic.
It is. And furthermore, it ensures that every step of this lineage is uniquely memorable. It's a testament to the idea that if the creator of the universe is preparing the stage for this ultimate arrival, then every variable from the rise and fall of empires down to a mistaken nickname in a desert town is being actively curated to set the perfect parameters.
Okay, so the stage is meticulously set. The Roman and Persian empires are kept out. The lineage has been distilled and brought safely back to Makkah. Abdul-Muttalib is now in his ancestral home.
He's back where he belongs.
Right. But as he grows up, he needs to cement his leadership among the fiercely competitive clans of the Quraysh. And the way he achieves this takes us into a narrative that feels like a legendary high-stakes treasure hunt.
It really does.
This brings us to the rediscovery of the Zamzam well.
And to appreciate the gravity of Zamzam, we have to understand the geography of survival. Makkah is a rocky, arid valley.
Water is everything.
Water is not just a commodity. It is absolute power, life, and sovereignty. The well of Zamzam originally sprang up miraculously for Prophet Ismail and his mother Hajar centuries prior, saving them from dehydration.
But then what happened to it?
Well, over the centuries, through warfare and the shifting of tribes, specifically the Jurhum tribe, who were driven out of Makkah, the well had been deliberately filled in,
Just
buried, covered up, and completely lost to history. It had devolved from a life-saving reality into a cultural myth. No one alive knew its actual location.
And Abdul-Muttalib, bearing the responsibility of his lineage, is desperate to find it. Whoever controls Zamzam controls the lifeblood of the city and the pilgrims who visit the Kaaba.
Exactly.
The text details that Abdul-Muttalib begins experiencing a highly cryptic, recurring dream. It happens over 4 consecutive nights, playing out like an ancient riddle being slowly decrypted.
A 4-part puzzle.
Yes. On the first night, a voice simply commands him to dig Tayyiba. He wakes up confused. He doesn't know what or where Tayyiba is in this context. The second night, the voice returns and says to dig Bara. The third night, the command is to dig Madmuna. And finally, on the fourth night, the voice explicitly tells him to dig Zamzam.
We really need to unpack the linguistic and spiritual weight of these terms.
Please do, because they sound so mysterious.
Because as the source indicates, they are not just random vocabulary words used to build suspense. They are highly specific titles reflecting the intrinsic nature of the well.
Okay, break them down for us. What is Tayyiba?
Tayyiba implies something utterly pure and wholesome, untouched by the corruption of the idols surrounding the Kaaba.
Got it. And Bara?
Bara connotes abundance and righteousness, signaling that this water will be a source of endless physical and spiritual nourishment.
Okay, third was Madmuna.
Madmuna means that which is guaranteed, hidden, or protected. This signifies that the well was divinely preserved underground, kept safe from exploitation until the rightful custodian came of age.
Ah, so waiting for Abdul-Muttalib.
Exactly. And finally, Zamzam, the actual name, which historically refers to the abundant gathering of water, or the command Hajar used to tell the water to stop or contain itself. So the dream is systematically revealing the theological profile of the well before revealing its location.
And when the dream finally provides the location on that fourth night, the coordinates it gives are incredibly bizarre.
Very unconventional coordinates.
Yeah, it doesn't give him a map with an X on it. The voice tells him, you will find the exact spot of Zamzam between blood and dung. It will be at a place where a crow with white feathers is pecking at the ground, and it will be located near an ant nest.
That is so hyper-specific and seemingly chaotic.
Right. How do you even begin to look for that?
Well, it sounds chaotic until you understand the physical layout of the Kaaba at that time. The area surrounding the Kaaba was filled with stone idols, specifically Isaf and Naila, where the Makkans would perform ritual animal sacrifices.
So blood and dung wouldn't be too out of place there.
Exactly. The source explains the exact mechanism of how this cryptic puzzle materialized in the real world. Abdul-Muttalib goes to the sanctuary and simply waits, watching the area.
And then what happens?
The text describes a scene where someone brings a calf to the idols for a ritual sacrifice. They strike the animal, but in its final frantic moments, the calf breaks free.
Oh, wow.
It runs in a panic and finally collapses and dies at a very specific, seemingly random spot in the dirt.
So right there, you instantly have the blood, and you have the dung from the animal's final moments.
Yes. Abdul-Muttalib rushes over to the spot. He looks down, and there is an ant nest in the earth.
No way.
And as he is looking, a crow with distinct white feathers lands and begins pecking at the ground right where the calf fell. Every single impossible, cryptic clue from the Four Nights of Dreams converges in this one chaotic, fleeting moment of reality.
That gives me chills. So having visually validated the divine coordinates, Abu Muttalib doesn't hesitate. He and his eldest son grab their tools and begin to dig.
But we must vividly picture the severe social dynamic unfolding here.
Right, because he's not alone.
No, he isn't digging in his private backyard. He is taking a pickaxe to the sacred, highly trafficked ritual area of the Quraysh, right next to their revered idols.
That's a huge taboo.
A massive tazu. He is doing this based entirely on a personal dream. The rest of the Quraysh tribe gathers around, initially mocking him, then becoming highly skeptical, and finally actively hostile.
I can imagine they were furious.
They demand he stop desecrating the area. But driven by the certainty of the vision, he ignores the threats and continues to strike the earth.
He just keeps digging deeper and deeper through the hard, packed rock and sand, and then suddenly the pickaxe breaks through.
They hit it.
They strike the ancient masonry of the well, and water begins to pool at their feet. Abdul Muttalib throws his hands up and shouts, Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest.
An incredible moment of triumph.
He has successfully unearthed the lost relic of his ancestors. He has found Zamzam. But of course, the very millisecond that fresh water appears in the desert dirt, the attitude of the mocking Quraysh completely flips.
Naturally. Because as we discussed, water in Makkah is not merely hydration, it is absolute economic and political hegemony.
They want it in.
Oh, the leaders of the various Quraysh clans instantly step forward and demand a share. They argue that since the well originally belonged to their shared forefather, Prophet Ismail, the water belongs to all the clans equally.
But Abdul Muttalib isn't having it.
He vehemently refuses. He argues the counterpoint.
Yeah.
The well was lost to everyone. He was the only one granted the divine vision, he endured their mockery, and he did the physical labor. Therefore, the custodianship of Zamzam belongs solely and exclusively to his specific branch of the family.
So we have a massive, explosive dispute on our hands.
Very explosive.
Rather than looking at this as a simple argument over, well, I look at it as a battle over a geopolitical monopoly. It's less like finding a public water fountain and more like discovering the only massive oil reserve in a 500-mile radius.
Exactly. Whoever controls the output controls the entire economy of the city.
The tension is at a boiling point. They know that if they fight it out in the streets of Makkah, it will lead to a devastating civil war, so they agree to seek outside, independent arbitration.
A smart move, but a difficult one.
Very difficult. They decide to take their dispute to a specific kahina, a female soothsayer or oracle who holds judicial authority, and she lives all the way in the Levant, or as some accounts suggest, near Medina or Khaybar.
It is vital to explain why they would seek out a kahina for this.
Yeah, why her?
Well, in a stateless tribal society without a centralized Supreme Court or a police force, severe disputes that could lead to bloodshed were often outsourced to these mystics or oracles.
Okay, so they were respected judges.
Right. They were seen as neutral third parties connected to the unseen world, whose judgments would be accepted by all tribes without losing honor.
But this journey to seek her judgment is where the source introduces a brutal, life-threatening trial.
The desert journey.
Traveling vast distances across the Arabian Peninsula wasn't a simple road trip. It was a perilous expedition. The source notes that their journey was severely delayed because torrential rains in the distant mountains had caused massive flash floods.
Known as sail.
Right, sail, which completely washed out and blocked the narrow passes of the desert.
And that delay is critical.
Because the journey stretches on for weeks, possibly months. And during this grueling, punishing trek under the sun, Abdul Muttalib's specific group runs completely out of their water rations.
They are in the deep, trackless desert.
There are no oases. They are literally facing death by dehydration. And the Quraysh elders traveling with them refuse to share their remaining water, preserving it for themselves.
Every man for himself at that point.
Exactly. Abu Muttalib and his companions literally dig shallow graves in the sand, sit down, and prepare to die of thirst. It is the absolute bleakest moment imaginable.
Just waiting for the end.
But just as all hope is entirely extinguished, the source describes a stunning miracle. Abdul Muttalib decides they shouldn't just sit and wait to die. They should mount their camels and keep moving until the very end.
Keep trying.
Yeah. And as he mounts his camel, the animal's hoof strikes the hard desert floor, or perhaps a rock, and suddenly, fresh, pure water bursts forth from the dry ground.
This is the absolute climax of the Zamzam dispute.
And it happens miles away from Makkah.
Yes. The opposing Quraysh elders, who were literally just watching Abdul-Muttalib's group face imminent death, witnessed this impossible spring erupting from the barren earth.
They must have been in shock.
They rush over, and Abdul-Muttalib, despite their previous cruelty, allows them to drink. They quench their thirst, saving their own lives.
He showed incredible grace there.
He did. And in that visceral moment of survival, the Quraysh have a profound collective epiphany.
What do they realize?
They realize the theological implications of what just happened. If divine providence is willing to miraculously shatter the desert floor to provide water for Abdul-Muttalib when he is thousands of miles from home.
And the water back home must be his too.
Exactly. It is undeniably clear that the water of Zamzam back in Makkah must belong to him as well. The source frames this desert miracle as the definitive, indisputable ruling from the heavens.
You don't even need to reach the Kahina anymore.
Nope. The dispute is settled completely right there in the sand.
The courtroom was the harshest environment on Earth, and the verdict was delivered through survival itself. This proves that the custodianship of Zamzam was inextricably bound to Abdul-Muttalib.
Yes, and by extension, it physically secured the economic and spiritual status of the forthcoming lineage of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Abdul-Muttalib's family now officially holds the greatest physical treasure and the most prestigious spiritual responsibility in Makkah, providing water to the pilgrims.
However, resolving one immense pressure immediately leads into the next profound trial.
Because it doesn't end there for Abdul-Muttalib.
Not at all. Because while his status is now permanently cemented, we have to look back at the psychological state he was in while he was initially digging the well.
When he was surrounded by his enemies.
Right. During that intense conflict, when he was standing alone in the dirt, surrounded by hostile, heavily armed Quraysh clans mocking him, he felt his vulnerability acutely.
He was outnumbered.
He realized he didn't have enough grown sons to protect him or his claims. And in that moment of desperation, he made a very heavy, dangerous vow to God.
And this brings us to one of the most intense, gripping parts of our deep dive. The text details that Abdul-Muttalib swore a binding oath. If God granted him 10 sons, and if those 10 sons survived to adulthood to stand as a wall of protection around him,
he would make the ultimate sacrifice.
He swore he would show his ultimate gratitude by taking one of those beloved sons to the Kaaba and sacrificing him.
Now, to our modern sensibilities, this sounds utterly horrific.
Totally incomprehensible.
But to understand it, we must immerse ourselves in the cultural psychology of the era.
Okay, let's unpack that.
In a pre-Islamic tribal society, there was no state infrastructure, no police, no courts. Your survival, your property, and your honor were entirely dependent on the physical strength of your clan.
Numbers meant safety.
Yes. Having many strong sons was the ultimate form of geopolitical security. So Abdul-Muttalib was offering the most valuable thing a man in that society could possibly possess.
And time passes. His prayer is actually answered beautifully. He is granted 10 strong, capable sons who grow to adulthood.
He's now the most secure, powerful man in Makkah.
But he's a man of deep spiritual integrity. He remembers his vow, and he feels absolutely bound to fulfill it. The emotional weight of this is crushing.
Unimaginable.
He gathers his 10 grown sons and explains the vow. They submit to his will. He takes them to the Kaaba, to the idol Hubal, where the priest uses wooden arrows to draw lots to divine which son must be sacrificed.
A completely agonizing process.
The names of the 10 sons are on the arrows. The priest draws a lot, and it falls on Abdullah.
And we have to note who Abdullah is here.
The text makes a point to emphasize that Abdullah is not just any son. He is the youngest, the most handsome, the most virtuous, and the absolute favorite of Abdul-Muttalib.
He is also, crucially, the destined father of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Exactly. Abdul-Muttalib is completely devastated. His heart is breaking, but he takes his knife in one hand, takes Abdullah by the other, and prepares to fulfill his oath right there in the sanctuary.
But before the blade can be drawn, the society erupts.
He intervenes.
The leaders of the Quraysh, the very people who used to oppose him, rush forward and physically restrain him. They are in absolute panic.
Why? Just out of love for Abdullah.
Well, it's not just out of love for the handsome young Abdullah. It is a profound fear of precedent.
Precedent.
They realize that Abdul-Muttalib is the paramount leader of the Arabs. If he publicly sacrifices his own son to fulfill a vow, it will establish a horrific, permanent religious tradition.
Oh, everyone would start doing it.
Exactly. Every father in Arabia will feel culturally and spiritually compelled to slaughter their own children to prove their devotion. They cannot allow this gruesome precedent to take root and destroy their
And
society.
they are essentially trying to stop a cultural virus before it spreads. So once again, they need to seek outside neutral arbitration to find a legal loophole to a divine oath.
They travel to consult another Kahina, a renowned mystic.
Right. And she listens to the dilemma, and her solution involves a fascinating use of the local legal and economic system, a process of escalating dayat, or blood money.
The Kahina asks them a fundamental legal question. What is the standard dayat for a human life in your culture?
Dayat is the compensation paid to a family when a member is killed to prevent endless cycles of blood feuds.
Yeah.
Deck.
They inform her that the standard price for a human life is 10 camels.
Okay.
She then gives them a procedure, place Abdullah on one side of the sanctuary, and bring the diet of 10 camels on the other side. Draw lots between the boy and the camels.
But if it falls on the camels?
If the lot falls on the camels, slaughter the animals, distribute the meat, and the vow is considered fulfilled. The boy is spared. But if the lot falls on Abdullah, it means the divine will demands a higher price. You must add 10 more camels and draw again. You must repeat this escalation until the ransom is accepted.
I really want to make sure you and the listener truly understand the scale of this, because it's easy to just hear the word camel and move on. Help me visualize the economics of this in today's terms.
Okay, in the ancient Arabian economy, a single camel was not just an animal. It was a transport vehicle, a source of premium wool, highly nutritious milk, meat, and immense liquid capital.
It was a fortune.
It was the absolute backbone of their trade empire. Owning 10 camels made you a wealthy man.
So what's the modern equivalent?
In modern terms, it would be equivalent to putting 10 luxury transport trucks or high-end sports cars on the line. It represented an enormous sum of wealth.
Okay, so 10 camels is already a fortune. The tension in the sanctuary must have been suffocating. They line up Abdullah. They line up the 10 camels. The priest draws the lot.
And it falls on Abdullah.
The crowd groans. The price is rejected. They add 10 more camels. It's now Abdullah versus 20 camels.
A massive fortune.
The priest draws again. Abdullah. They add 10 more. 30 camels. Abdullah.
The tension is just building and building.
The text says this agonizing process repeated again and again and again. 40 camels. 50. 60. The wealth of the city is piling up in the courtyard, and the lot continuously falls on the young man.
70. 80. 90 camels.
The lot still falls on Abdullah. Finally, the ransom reaches a staggering, almost unimaginable sum of 100 camels.
A whole fleet of luxury trucks, basically.
The priest reaches in, draws the lot, and finally it falls on the camels.
But Abdul-Muttalib wants to be absolutely certain.
Right, he doesn't just stop there.
No, he insists they draw the lot 3 more times at the 100 camel mark. And all 3 times, it falls on the animals.
The divine will has accepted the ransom.
Abdullah is saved. 100 camels, an absolute fortune, are slaughtered and left in the open for the poor, the travelers, and even the wild animals to consume freely.
I really want to pause and analyze the psychological and social aftermath of this event, specifically on Abdullah.
It must have changed him.
Imagine being that young man. You just stood in the center of your city while your literal worth was tallied up 10 by 10 against massive fortunes in front of everyone you know.
Talk about a public valuation.
The source implicitly shows how this massive public ransom instantly and permanently elevated Abdullah's value and profile in Makkah. He wasn't just Abdul-Muttalib's favorite son anymore, he was a living legend.
He was the man whose life was literally worth 100 camels.
And the timing is incredible because this happens right before his marriage, completely amplifying his status in the eyes of every tribe.
That is a very astute analysis of the social dynamics. His survival meant the prophesied lineage could physically continue, but it also meant he was culturally marked with a supreme, almost untouchable aura of worth.
Yeah.
And if we look deeper at the in-depth theological analysis the source provides, this event secures a profound historical symmetry.
A symmetry.
Yes, leading to the famous title, The Son of the Two Sacrificed.
Ah. Because of Prophet Ismail.
Exactly. Generations earlier, Prophet Ismail was laid down to be sacrificed by his father Abraham, but was saved by divine intervention and replaced with a ram.
Right.
Now, generations later, Abdullah is laid down to be sacrificed by his father, but is saved by divine intervention and replaced with 100 camels.
A parallel is undeniable.
The text argues that just as the Creator preserved Ismail to birth the pure lineage, he meticulously intervened to preserve Abdullah to ensure the exact, precise timed arrival of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
This flawlessly transitions us into the final segment of our deep dive because Abdullah's elevated status wasn't just about his wealth or his survival.
It manifested physically.
Yes, the source material details how his special status manifested in a very literal, physical way leading up to the passing of the prophetic mandate. The text describes a phenomenon associated with Abdullah just prior to his marriage.
The incident with the woman from the other tribe.
Yes, he is traveling outside of Makkah, and he passes by the encampment of another tribe. A woman there, noted for her intelligence and beauty, looks at Abdullah. But she doesn't just see a handsome, wealthy young man who survived a sacrifice.
She sees something else.
The text explicitly says she saw a literal, physical nur, a glowing light shining clearly on Abdullah's forehead.
This nur is central to the spiritual mechanics detailed in the text.
Sir.
Well, the woman recognizes this light not merely as a physical anomaly, but as a profound spiritual marker. She was literate in the ancient traditions, and the source indicates she understood instantly that this was the concentrated light of the promised prophet.
Carried within the bloodline.
Exactly. Recognizing the monumental significance of this, she immediately stops him and offers herself in marriage to Abdullah right then and there.
She shoots her shot.
She is desperately hoping to secure that blessed, world-altering lineage within her own womb.
But Abdullah, being dutiful, delays. He tells her he must return to his father and consult him. Shortly after he returns to Makkah, his father arranges his marriage to Amina, a woman of incredibly noble lineage.
A crucial union.
And after he's married to Amina, Abdullah happens to encounter that exact same woman from the other tribe again.
Awkward.
Right. He assumes the offer might still stand, but her reaction this time is completely different. She looks at him, and she outright declines him.
Why?
She explicitly tells him that the light she previously saw shining so brightly on his forehead has completely vanished from his face. She notes that the light had been permanently transferred to Amina.
And the mechanism the source is describing here is the literal, physical transmission of the prophetic mandate.
So the light wasn't his to keep.
No, the nur, or light, was never Abdullah's personal, permanent possession. He was merely the designated custodian of it. His entire existence, his preservation from sacrifice, was to carry that light. Once he was united with Amina, that sacred trust was successfully passed on to her, as she was the specific woman divinely chosen to bear Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
And Abdullah passes away shortly after this.
Yes, his life's monumental purpose having been entirely fulfilled.
This transfer of light brings us to the culmination of our entire deep dive, the night of the birth itself.
And the way the source describes this night is staggering.
It reads like a global, synchronized event. It describes chaotic, simultaneous reactions across multiple geographic locations, different religions, and entirely different realms of existence. Let's break down the specific reactions outlined in the text.
Okay, let's start with Medina.
First, we have the account from the companion, Hassan, may Allah be pleased with him. The text notes that at the time of the birth, Hassan, may Allah be pleased with him, was a 7-year-old boy living hundreds of miles away in Medina.
Right.
On that specific night, he vividly remembers witnessing a highly respected Jewish scholar running frantically through the streets of Medina in the dark, screaming at the top of his lungs.
Screaming what?
He was shouting to everyone that the star of Ahmad had risen in the sky, and declaring that prophethood had permanently, irrevocably left the lineage of the children of Israel.
This moment connects every single thread we have discussed. We see that same hyper-specific foreknowledge from the ancient scriptures playing out in real time.
The scholars were watching the skies.
The scholars who had devoted their lives to studying those texts didn't just know the behavioral traits, they knew the astronomical signs. They knew the exact alignment of the stars.
It's like an ancient tracking system.
Their knowledge was so precise that the very moment the birth occurred in Makkah, they recognized the cosmic shift instantly, even miles away in the city of Medina.
And the realization wasn't isolated to Medina or to one scholarly tradition. Back in Makkah, there is the incredible story of a Christian monk.
Another fascinating reaction.
The text points out that this particular monk lived a life of extreme asceticism up on a mountain overlooking Makkah, and he had not come down to interact with the city for years.
Completely isolated.
But on this specific night, he comes running down the mountain wildly, his hair disheveled, frantically grabbing the people of Makkah and asking if a male child was born among them that night.
The Meccans, likely confused by his frantic state, confirmed that yes, a child was just born to the family of Abdullah.
The monk demands to be taken to see the infant immediately.
And what happens when he sees him?
He is brought to the house.
Hmm.
And the text describes that the exact moment he lays eyes on the newborn baby's face, the reaction is extreme and visceral. The monk literally swoons and collapses to the floor. He completely faints.
Overwhelmed by it.
When the people finally manage to revive him and he regains consciousness, he makes the exact same earth-shattering declaration as the scholar in Medina.
That the shift has happened.
He declares that the massive shift has occurred, that the final messenger prophesied in the gospel has finally arrived. You have two different scholars, deeply embedded in two completely different religious traditions, living in two different cities, having the exact same undeniable physical and theological reaction on the exact same night.
It is a profound historical convergence. But what makes this source truly expansive is that it refuses to stop at the human reaction.
Right, it gets even bigger.
It broadens the lens to include the perspective of the unseen world, which elevates the narrative from a mere historical turning point to a truly cosmic, universal event.
And this part is wild. The companion Abdul bin Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, recounts a chilling story relayed to him by a former kahina, a soothsayer.
Right. And before Islam, these soothsayers derived their power and their hidden knowledge by communicating with jinns.
Now, we should quickly explain what jinns are in this context for those who don't know. In Islamic theology, jinns are a parallel creation to humans, beings made of smokeless fire who live unseen alongside us with their own societies and abilities.
And the soothsayers relied on them to eavesdrop on the heavens and steal fragments of future knowledge.
But on the night of the birth, this soothsayer reports that the entire realm of the jinns was thrown into absolute terrifying chaos.
Total panic.
The text paints this incredibly vivid, violent picture of their reality being upended. Their beds were suddenly flipped over, their cooking pots were overthrown, and most importantly, the lower heavens were suddenly heavily guarded by angels.
Shooting meteors.
Yes, shooting flaming meteors to violently prevent any jinn from eavesdropping ever again.
The underlying theological logic here is essential to grasp. The birth of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wasn't simply an earthly demographic addition.
It was a cosmic event.
According to the source, it triggered a systemic, violent reorganization of the universe's entire spiritual architecture. The heavens had to be absolutely sealed and fortified to protect the purity of the forthcoming revelation of the Quran from any demonic tampering.
That explains the meteors.
This resulted in a catastrophic disruption of the unseen world status quo. The flipped beds and overthrown pots the soothsayer describes are likely literal manifestations of the sheer panic and physical displacement the jinns experienced as their ancient access to the heavens was permanently severed.
So the old spiritual order was being violently dismantled in the unseen realm to make way for the new reality on Earth.
Precisely.
When you step back and look at the whole picture, it is breathtaking. You have these simultaneous, explosive reactions occurring across different major cities, Makkah and Medina.
Yes.
You have it happening across different ancient religions, the Jewish astronomer and the Christian ascetic, and you even have it echoing across entirely different dimensions of existence, the human world and the unseen realm of the jinns.
A true multiverse event.
It really is a true, undeniable multiverse event. If you could, I'd love for you to synthesize how this multifaceted, chaotic reaction perfectly validates the very first premise we discussed today.
Yeah.
The absolute, unmatched anticipation of this arrival.
Well, if we draw all the threads together from Chapter 2 of this text, the narrative architecture is incredibly cohesive and awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
The source meticulously argues that the arrival of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the culmination of a project that involved the entire fabric of reality.
Macro and micro.
We saw how the massive geopolitical superpowers of Rome and Persia were held at bay to create a pristine, neutral broadcasting zone. We saw how ancient scriptures provided granular behavioral details that moved kings to draft royal decrees centuries in advance.
Right.
We tracked how the lineage was painstakingly distilled and preserved through miraculous desert rescues, like the 100 camels saving Abdullah. We watched geographical treasures like Zamzam be purposefully reestablished just in time to provide for that lineage.
Perfectly timed.
By the time the birth actually occurs, the simultaneous chaos among the scholars on Earth and the jinns in the unseen world serves as the final, resounding proof of the text's core thesis.
Which is?
This wasn't just a local birth in a desert town. It was an event the entire cosmos had been holding its breath for, an arrival meticulously engineered from the dawn of history.
It is a stunning historical, geopolitical, and spiritual tapestry. It completely changes how you look at the mechanics of history. And it leaves me with a final, deeply provocative thought that I want to leave with you, our listener, to mull over long after this deep dive
Let's
ends.
hear it.
If, according to these ancient sources, the grand sweep of history, the shifting borders of empires, the geography of hidden desert wells, and even the unseen architecture of the heavens were so painstakingly arranged and deeply interconnected to set the stage for this one singular arrival, how much of our own seemingly random historical events, or even the frustrating, inexplicable circumstances in our own daily lives, are actually precise, deliberate movements within a much larger unseen design?
That's a heavy thought.
A design that we simply don't have the altitude or the perspective to see yet. It truly makes you rethink the entire concept of coincidence. Thank you so much for joining us and exploring this incredible historical landscape on this deep dive. As always, please remember to subscribe, like, and follow the show so you can catch all our future explorations into the hidden depths of history.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time.